Hello, this is Steve Lentini, and I'm your host for the podcast, Different Thinking for Different Times. Season 3, Episode 22. So this podcast is about our job as humans, human beings, the one human race, to overcome all small-minded thinking and reinforced. I've always had this thinking, and since I was small, probably 5, I at least can remember this kind of thinking, that it was small-minded thinking that thought of vengeance and anger and of heaven and hell, and that whatever created this wondrous miracle that we live in had the traits of human beings, anger and jealousy and vengeance shall be mine, says the Lord, according to people who wrote it. And what I noted, even at an early age, was it was people that wrote it, that it didn't sound divine or like the Creator. Baruch Spinoza was born in 1632, and by the time he was 24, he was excommunicated by the synagogue that he belonged to. His name was Baruch, and he changed it to Benedict because he figured it didn't matter what faith he had, that he would not be denied whatever came next, if there was a next. He wasn't sure. His own philosophy was live life. Live and breathe in the creation, be in the moment in the creation, and that he saw the miracle in the oceans, in the stars, in the trees, in all the flowers, in everything that just existed, in the forest. There was nothing that didn't amaze him and nothing he didn't find awe in, that it was all a miracle to him. And so at the age of 24, people at the synagogue didn't like what he was saying when they asked him questions about different topics. And eventually they went to the elders, and the elders offered him 1,000 florins, whatever that would be, monthly, an annuity, right? If he would, in all overt ways, speech and action, conform to the established opinions and customs of the synagogue. And they said, if you don't see the wisdom of this, the wisdom and profit of compliance, they threatened to isolate him by excommunication. So changing his name to Benedict, you know that he chose excommunication, and he was on that path from there. And his writings in the mid-1600s were about the God, the divine being everywhere in the now. And he didn't get the gift that I got, and many others have had, the near-death experience, which proves we go from this to that, which is what death should be called. If you've listened before, in my opinion, we should call it what's next. And that our job here is to overcome all that egoic hubris, small-minded thinking. The thought even that we think like God, or that God thinks like us, is laughable. And you'll know that. You'll discover it for yourself. For now, you have to take my word for it, but think about it. Would what created this miracle we live in, a universe that we can't define, that as close as physicists think they've gotten there, that far away. They're as far as the Aztecs and the Incas thinking they had to sacrifice babies and princesses, or even the years of animal sacrifices. All of that was just what humans were capable of at the time, and still you can see evidence of the small-minded thinking everywhere. And yet no one asks the question, could that be God? Could that be what created the universe? To me, it's the creation, because it had no sex. It wasn't male nor female when I was on the other side. When I entered into what's next, I had a physical body 1 second. The next second, just a knowing. I was one with everything and nothing. Nobody. Just one with the infinite. And nothing from here, everything we give such importance to was there. And even the things people rail against. There were no opinions, no races, no nationalities, no sexual preferences, no sexes. Everything was one. It's all been divided here by the creation into trillions and trillions of tiny life forms. We think we're a big life form, but as one of my coaches once said, could we be ants next to a bridge abutment? I mean, we're living in a miracle and we take it for granted, and then we make others wrong over trivial things. Who cares what someone else's opinion is? And yet people rail against it on Twitter and Facebook and many other places. News media is reporting one side or the other, and all of it is small-minded. Until we can model the behavior that we want to see in others, our children won't, our political leaders certainly don't, but our children won't, because they'll model what they see. In my household, thank the creation for my parents, there were no races. There were just names of people. My father worked with people who were challenged. One gentleman wrote a ticket to my dad when we rode with him to work one day, stopped his car, gave him a ticket. I said, Dad, you got a ticket. We were probably 10, my twin brother and I. And Dad said, oh, yeah, he just thinks he's a policeman. And the hospital gives him a coat and a hat and a badge and a ticket book. And he had always spoken of him. I think his name was Joe. And then there was Tim, who came home to cut our hair. He came home with Dad. Apparently he had visitation. He could leave the hospital. And he would occasionally have a tick. Yes, yes, he would say as he sniffed in hard and his body would jerk while he was cutting our hair. I'm sure we had interesting haircuts, but there was nothing but love for humanity. Not saying the household was perfect, because certainly there wasn't. It wasn't. But in general, there was not discussion of making people wrong. In fact, my mother used to say, before you say something, she said, think what good would it do? And on the other side, when I left my body from this to that, the only thing mentioned in my life review was the good I had done. Think about that. How do you feel when you do good? Our job is to overcome that brain that we think is right, that makes others wrong. For whatever reason, it's wrong. Their political views, their sexual preference or orientation, their choices they want to make in their life, truly none of our business. Now, if you want to get active in politics, then model the behavior of a broad-minded, infinite thinker that would be open to compromise, not to twist the truth to make others wrong. And both sides in this country do it, and many countries have multiple parties, like Parliament in Britain. But compromise and treating each other with respect. Someone posted on LinkedIn the other day, if talking to plants in a wonderful way produces positive growth for plants, think what it would do for humans. And we've lost that. So we can be right and others can be wrong. And there's really no one that's exempt from it. There's examples of it everywhere. Just think about it in your own home, in your own family, with relatives. Everyone has stories of neighbors, friends, relatives sitting around gossiping about people whose lives are none of their business. They just feel better because someone's had a failing or a mistake, and they can say, look what this one did, or look what that one did, or that one, what that one is doing, or look at how they think. Can you imagine they belong to this party or that party? or they chose a different sex partner, a same-sex partner, or they chose to change their sex, or the color of their skin, or their race. I mean, people do it everywhere, and it's all small-minded thinking. So for everyone who listens to this, I suppose you listen because you're working on it. You find something, a nugget in there to work on, and you have to prove it to yourself. Don't take my word for it. If I ever tell you I found the way, run away. Check in with me in 6 months and see if I've regained my sanity, please. Making others wrong, small-minded thinking, that's not what created this universe, an infinite universe. And in our little area, we have a planet the size of a marble, maybe. I just make it a marble, but it's probably smaller in relation to the whole size of the universe, floating around an exposed nuclear fusion plant, a burning star we call the sun, at the exact right spot for life to occur. And a rock that we see at night with such a great shining light when it's full moon, especially, that affects our tides. And that's not a miracle. And whatever created that gave us the small-minded thinker to overcome. Because when you leave your body, you take nothing with you. There'd be no mention of all the titles, the songs you sang, the books you sold, the houses you owned. You become a soul. And nothing from here matters except, fascinating, the lives you touch. So if you're selfish and greedy and tight and don't share, you may have some certainly good moments that'll flash before you. You may not have as many as someone like Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King. I mean, just think of all the lives they touched with their message. Think of their message. They all work to overcome small-minded thinking and think of the impact they made. And that's our job. Prove it to yourself. Work on your small-minded thinking. In the supermarket, in traffic, at work, in conversations with family members, and challenge anyone who makes light of anyone's race or sexual preference or their marriage partner or their political views. Who cares? It's none of your business. If you'd like to challenge me or come on the podcast, I'd love to interview you. You can email me, steve@stevelentini.com. That's Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at S-T-E-V-E, L as in Linda, E-N as in Nancy, T-I-N-I.com. And remember, I might just ask you, does that sound like small-minded thinking? Thanks.